Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, the major motion podcast, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Negroni, film editor for InBetweenDrafts.com. And from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's a freelance film writer, and, he also is a good guy. It's Will Ashton.
Oh, that's very sweet of you. Hey, John.
Hey there. Well, I'm being sweet to you, but really I'm going to do evil things to you, even though I'm acting all nice.
Ooh, that's sneaky.
Speaking of sneaky, we have somebody sneaking in as our guest this week from Seattle, Washington. He is one of our co-hosts on Mad Men Men. That's the Mad Men podcast that Will and I do with this person. And he is, of course, Mike Overhols. Hey, Mike.
Hey, John. How's it going, buddy?
It's going super well. It's been a while since, I don't know, have the three of us ever done a Cinemaholics main show episode before? I know you've come on before, Mike.
I was going to say, I was thinking about it, and I know, Mike, you've come on, I think, 2 or 3 times when I've guest hosted. I know you were there for Cocaine Bear and Last Voyage of the Meter.
Yep.
I can't remember if there was another one that you came on. I saw you are my go-to guy if there's a horror movie that John wishes out on and doesn't see, or sees but doesn't talk about. And then you
Mike's going to say yes to it because he's like, oh, we get to make fun of John when he's
Yes, exactly, yeah. So it's always a fun time. Those episodes are fun if anyone wants to check those out. Yeah.
I like how you're promoting them.
Yeah, it's a whole subgenre of the Mike and Will horror cinemaholics.
It's true. There's some horror stuff in this movie, but really one of the main reasons I wanted to invite you on for this one, Mike, I don't know if Will agrees, is that it's Martin Scorsese. And I think a lot of people I know who love movies, who love film, you're somebody I know who's been a longtime fan of Martin Scorsese and somebody who has seen many, if not all of his films, right? I think we all have our blind spots. Will, I think, had a very notable one until recently. He finally watched Goodfellas. But Mike, have you seen every single Scorsese?
I thought you were going to say Cape Fear, which I also watched recently.
Oh, yeah, there's that too.
Yeah, I don't know how Will got through his life not watching Goodfellas, but yes, Scorsese is one of my favorite working directors. I would say I've seen every one of his important movies, even the more non-important ones. I'm currently doing a rewatch with my friend Levi through all the movies, and it's just like the discography, his directing credits, it just runs deep. He's so good. Goodfellas is a movie that did change my life in terms of making me love movies more. I'll never forget the first time I watched Goodfellas when I was 14.
Yeah. Goodfellas was very influential for me. There are a few early movies from him I haven't seen, very early, like his 70s stuff. The only 70s movies I've seen from him besides Taxi Driver, it would I guess be Mean Streets. I never saw Boxcar Bertha, right? Mean Streets though, love that movie. I love the way it opens. I love the cinematography. I love the Harvey Keitel performance. It's just, it's not his best movie, but it definitely, I have a soft spot for it. What's your favorite Scorsese, Mike, if you have to pick? I mean, everybody knows mine's Goodfellas. I don't have to dance around
it's Raging Bull. It's Raging Bull without a question. It's so good.
Yeah. It's up there for me too. Probably second or third for me. But what about you, Will? I know you like Scorsese across the board. I know you like some of his later stuff, particularly recently. You were a fan of The Irishman. But
oh yeah,
was there anything though that really sticks out for you?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of bounce between two. It kind of depends on my mood. The obvious one would be Taxi Driver. That was my first score. Well, actually, I think The Aviator was my first Scorsese, but Taxi Driver was the first one. I remember I watched at 13 or 14, and I was just like, okay, this is a director, I gotta focus on this. I mean, I had known of him, but I didn't know the depths of his predicate.
You knew the man, but not the myth and the legend.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know. I often find myself going back to the camp comedy. I think that's one of his I've watched the most. I really do love comedy Scorsese, After Hours as well. And I mean, all his movies, well, not all of them, but a lot of his movies have little bits of comedy. Killers of the Flower Moon is no exception. But I just love when he really goes full ham. And I love a good dark comedy. I love a great character study. And I love that Scorsese has been really championing Killers of the Flower Moon recently. He keeps talking about it on TikTok and in interviews recently. What was that?
He's passionate about cinema.
Oh, yeah.
He can't hide it.
So, for the sake of not being too much of a basic guy, I am going to say King of Comedy.
I love King of Comedy, but I came to that one pretty late. I remember when I watched it, it was like ahead of Joker. And I know like Will and a couple of friends of the show were very much like, John, you got to see it. Very much your thing. I have a soft spot for After Hours and The Color of Money. I like that whole era of Scorsese. I think Last Temptation of Christ was like out right after that, I want to say. I want to know, though, what was the first Scorsese movie you saw in theaters? So, Will, it sounds like yours was The Aviator.
No, it was Shutter Island.
It was Shutter. I was going to say Shutter Island was mine because I couldn't see The Departed. I wanted to see The Departed in theaters so dang badly, but nobody would go with me. And probably because of the length and also because it was R-rated. And I was like 15, so I was kind of like, I want to go see it. I want to go see it. And finally somebody threw a bone and I got to see it with my brother-in-law. But it was like a home viewing kind of thing. But Shutter Island, I was like, heck yeah, I'm 20 years old. Let's go. What about you, Mike?
So technically mine was Gangs of New York, but it wasn't the original release. It was I saw it at like an independent theater that was just putting it on again when I was like 14.
Since you brought up Gangs of New York, what's the Scorsese movie you don't like? For me, it's Gangs of New York. I tried to watch it twice. I got through it the first time and I was like, I don't know. And then I came back to it years later and I was like, you know what? Maybe I was just like a dumb moron. And so like I should just appreciate cinema, but I don't like that movie. But do you guys have either of you have a Scorsese or like This Ain't It?
I mean, I don't really have one that I would outright never watch again. I do have ones I would just don't hit as hard. For me, it's Aviator. Probably Aviator number one. Just think that movie kind of drags. And I
don't even think about that movie much. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, ironic, considering it was probably my first one, but The Aviator is the one I feel like I think about the least, or I don't have the desire to revisit. I still like it. I mean, it's a good movie. I'm not going to say otherwise, but by Scorsese standards, I feel it's not up there.
Yeah.
I do want to say, if you're listening to all this, and I think there's a lot of people who haven't dove deep into the history of Scorsese, especially his earlier works. If you're looking for a jumping off point, I really do think you should start with Mean Streets, because you're watching
a guide for it, Mike.
Yeah, I do have a whole guide for it.
You did the Eras tour, but for Scorsese.
Scorsese Eras. But Mean Streets is the best place to start because you're kind of watching Scorsese figure out his own style in real time. And I think it's just a great foundation for what you're going to see him do the rest of his career.
I wonder if there's like a podcast that's devoted just to Martin Scorsese. Like they do that kind of thing where they're like, okay, we're going to be completists and watch or rewatch all of his movies. I bet there is something like that because there's like the Stephen King podcast that kind of does that for all his adaptations. There's the one for that Chris Evangelista did, right, for 21st Century Spielberg, right? So I bet there is one. I'm literally like typing it in.
All right, so we're 8 minutes and 27 seconds into the recording, and John has already pitched an idea for another podcast.
I'm not pitching a podcast. I'm looking for a podcast that already did it. I don't see anything, but it just might be one of those things that like is buried, you know, like every Martin Scorsese movie. I'd have to look it up later, but anyway, we're here to talk about his latest film, Killers of the Flower Moon. And I'm going to look up what number this is in his filmography. I think it's in the teens, or maybe he's made over 20 movies. You guys know?
It's more than that.
It's more than that?
Yeah, it's definitely more than that. I think this is like in the 30s, 32?
Yeah, I mean, are you talking just narrative films or like the documentaries? Like there's a lot.
Just narrative.
Okay. Narrative, I think.
26.
Okay.
There's a few that I usually don't think of quickly, like Age of Innocence and all that. But yeah, I had to look it up because I definitely couldn't remember. But yeah, 26 movies. In terms of documentaries, I know that's in the teens. He's done a bunch. That's at least like 12 to 15, if not more. But yeah, so let's talk about Killers of the Flower Moon. This is his 26th feature film, and it's an epic Western crime drama, which is interesting for him. Definitely when I was like starting to watch it, It was kind of like, oh, I'm kind of getting that vibe of like when it's not a very similar movie at all to The Hateful Eight, but it was kind of reminding me of like when Tarantino kind of went to the West and he started to apply his style to like a traditional Western and kind of spin it. And so we kind of have something somewhat similar here with Scorsese. This movie stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone, also Robert De Niro. It's based on a pretty popular book. In fact, a book by David Grann that's also called Killers of the Flower Moon. It came out in 2017. A lot more people I know have read this book than I realized, like in the lead up to this movie. Like I had so many people after I watched the movie and I reviewed it and started talking about it and everything. I started getting like, people that I know just like in real life, like, not like total cinephiles, but people who like movies and were like, you know what? Hey, I read that book like a few years ago. It's awesome. Like, how does it compare? I'm like, oh shoot, I haven't read the book. But I think, Will, did you say you read the book or did I imagine that?
No, I was reading it like the week before it came out. Okay. I've had it on my shelf for a long time. Haven't read it. I'm about halfway through it. Mike, I believe though, has read the book.
Oh yeah. Okay. So Mike, you did read this book. Like, did you read it like a while ago? So like, it's pretty established for you?
This is a book I picked. This was an airport book like a while ago. I picked up, just looked interesting. I didn't even realize it was the next Scorsese movie that was coming out. But I started on the plane and I finished it that entire in basically one sitting once I was on the trip. It's so good.
I feel like I would like to go on an airport trip with you, Mike. I feel like we would have fun at the airport. Probably go get drunk. Probably, I'd make a few jokes like Mike Overboard is now boarding. Yeah.
But without getting too ahead, and I want to see if Mike agrees with this, what's fascinating about the film in comparison to the book is that it kind of works as a companion piece in the sense that like they're telling the same story, but they're telling it in a different way.
Yeah, I've heard about this.
In the book, like a lot of events that are detailed throughout the film are said pretty early on in the book, but it's kind of more about building the suspense and kind of mystery of it and establishing more of the FBI's role as far as solving the case. And the movie, without, I don't know if this is too much to say too early on, but it's kind of more about like the insidious nature of how this happens to this county and like how you're seeing someone rot within this very malleable person who becomes this agent of chaos for this very malicious personality.
Yeah. This movie's more of a character study from the perspective of the Osage members, kind of an ensemble perspective, but mainly the Lily Gladstone character. We haven't set it up properly yet.
Right.
But,
if
I can do that real quick.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, because there just might be some people listening who don't know what we're talking about, right? So what we're referring to is this is a real life thing that happened in the 1920s that the book is narrativizing. And essentially there's this tribe that started up in like the Missouri kind of Midwestern area too. They eventually like moved down to the Oklahoma area and they were forced onto this reservation and by the American government. But as fate would kind of have it, they struck black gold. They found oil and the Osage Nation tribal members became insanely wealthy over a very short period of time. So this movie takes place in the aftermath of that in the 1920s. So this is Prohibition era, fallout of World War I. And the Osage, like in this area, have like all this wealth, but they're essentially like not allowed to fully control it. So there's this kind of infiltration of like the white man, a lot of white men coming in and like marrying into the Osage family. And then over the course of this decade or so, a lot of people started dying. A lot of Osage members started dying mysteriously, outright murder, and a lot of their money was going to like people in the white families. And this was something that eventually got the attention of the federal government, but this movie sort of about how long that took and also the kind of early beginnings of the FBI, because this was a case where the local government in Oklahoma just refused to do anything about this. And mainly it's implied because they were incentivized not to. And so this movie is kind of exploring how that stuff happens. The book apparently is about more of like the FBI side of things. And at least that's what I've been told. Whereas this movie that's there, but the focus more on the Osage part of the equation. And particularly Scorsese has even said that when he was adapting the book, he changed a lot of what he originally envisioned for it. By the way, he co-wrote this movie with Eric Roth, and they consulted a lot of the Osage people on that, and it was apparently a huge influence on why this movie does have such a different framing. And I think some people would say for the best, because if it had been a direct one-to-one with the book, it likely, based on my understanding, would have struck as very disingenuous for a lot of people. Like in that community particularly. Eric Roth, by the way, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, probably most famous for also Curious Case Benjamin Button. Pretty well-known writer. I think his most recent thing was Dune, I think. I'll have to look it up. But anyway, so that's the setup. So sorry, Will, if you had something else you wanted to add?
Oh, I just wanted to say, yeah, I mean, you kind of lightly touched on it, but yeah, I mean, I think there are a number of factors that kind of led to the changing of the focus of the film. But I think primarily it was because Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio, who's also a producer in the film, were meeting with the Osage County, wanted to make sure their perspective was more central to the narrative and that it wasn't something that was going to be disrespectful. And so I think that did kind of lead to the shifting of the focus a bit. But also, it did kind of seem like initially, I guess Leonardo DiCaprio, I could be wrong, but I remember hearing that he was, I think, supposed to be Tom White, the Jesse Plemons character. And then he was
going to be like a detective thriller at first, with him.
And then he was just kind of like, I don't know, I'm feeling more this earnest guy.
Honestly, I think that was the right decision, because I think that this is a very unusual DiCaprio performance for him. And that's kind of for the best, because it kind of gives DiCaprio a chance to do something different and not just slide into his like comfort zone. At least I think so. This is the movie that technically Scorsese wanted to make this before The Irishman. He wanted to make this as soon as like 2016, I think. I think almost even before the book came out. There was like a bidding war over a film adaptation of this. The book itself, I think, is a nonfiction, if I'm not mistaken.
I think the book came out in 2017, which is the same year that The Lost City of Zed came out, which is also based on his book. So yeah, I think it was just like really hot, and a story like this does take a long time. An epic doesn't form overnight.
Right.
Yeah.
And just putting it into perspective, right? I mean, Lost City of Zed was like one of our first reviews on Cinemaholics. It's kind of wild to think that 6 years later, we're just getting to this movie that had been in the works for him, that he had every intention to make. So that said, eventually Irishman did come out and all of that, and so now we have this movie. And I think that Killers of the Flower Moon, a lot of people are noting it for its length. It is a longer film, 206 minutes. It's nowhere close to his longest movie. It's his like sixth longest movie. But for Scorsese, you're definitely comparing to other people, right? Also a very big budget, $200 million. Now we are talking about this movie about a week after it has hit theaters. It's an Apple movie that is being distributed by Paramount Pictures. So it is going to be on Apple TV Plus through like the Apple Original Films thing. I think that streaming date hasn't been announced yet, as far as I understand. I could be wrong at this point. But theatrically, the movie hasn't been a huge hit yet. It's only made $59 million so far. I think their hopes are that it's going to be released theatrically, and like Oscar buzz and things like that might carry it. That said, that's probably why they're not announcing a streaming date, because they may not want to stream it until after award season, because they can put it in more theaters and all that. Because it's going to be a tricky movie to make its budget back and then some. But because it's in that award season flavor, it's one of the front runners for Best Picture. It's got definitely some awards consideration for the actors, especially Lily Gladstone. It is one of those movies that could go the distance, but it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint, right? But what do we think of this movie? Let's talk about Killers of the Flower Moon. Let's review this thing. And it sounds like we all are coming at it from slightly different perspectives and from different places in terms of how much we knew about the story going into it. But we'll start with you, Mike, because you are the guest. And you have been known, I actually revealed this to our group chat today, that Mike never lies. And that has been confirmed. So what you're about to hear is nothing but truth.
Yeah. So, when I look across the screen to you, John Negroni, standing at your 5'2" stature, I really like this movie. I do love how Will put that. It's like a companion piece for the book. I definitely think if you want to see the movie, you should also read the book. It kind of reminds me of 2001: A Space Odyssey in that regard, where like the novel and the book, or the novel and the Kubrick movie, they go so well together. Just gives you more details. But besides it being a great narrative and really interesting, crazy that all happened, I could watch 3.5 hours of just De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio sharing scenes. I would say two of my favorite performances this year, maybe in the past couple years. Like them sharing scenes was a masterclass. There's moments I keep coming back to. That's still just in my brain. I keep thinking about. And then the character of Molly is just so good and so different than you get in a lot of modern movies. So, to summarize it all, really like this movie. One of my favorites of the year. Definitely something I'll go and rewatch, even with the long runtime.
Yeah, that Lily Gladstone performance, it's a bit of a magic trick, right? Because it's hard to talk about this movie without giving certain things away that I wouldn't want to know going into the movie. But in terms of her character, like, there's just something that's like very honest about her sort of like her reactions and her interpretation of like these horrific things happening around her, where there's such an amazing line between like a character being victimized, but yet having agency, but yes, also being a tragic character. Like, I don't know if I've ever seen a movie or seen a performance like really balance that, so expertly. I think that she's just she's a dynamite actor. I think this is her second or third film this year. One of the other major ones is Fancy Dance, which came out of Sundance, I want to say. And I really enjoyed that movie. And what's wrong? Will's raising his arms. He's shrugging. He's like, what are you talking about, John?
No, I'm sure that movie's fine. I have no issues with that. That just sounds like a stereotypical Sundance movie. Like if there's like a parody of a Sundance movie, it'd be like Fancy Dance or Fancy Pants, whatever you said.
It's a good movie. It really is. I do recommend it. But I think this is definitely a breakout year for her. I mean, she's been in plenty of good stuff. People will probably recognize her from Reservation Dogs, and I think she was in First Cow. She had I think kind of a smaller role in that. But yeah, if folks want to see more Lily Gladstone, they can definitely check out Fancy Dance.
She's also in another Kelly Reichardt film, Certain Women, and she was in an indie called The Unknown Country that I believe I saw last year, if not earlier this year. Solid film, good showcase for her as well. Yeah.
And she also I think was a writer on that movie, wasn't she? On Unknown Country?
Forget. You might be right. I don't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, she's the heart
story
of the film.
writer. Okay. Yeah, just
story credit. But yeah, she's the heart of the film here. I mean, it's so central and so crucial to the story that Scorsese's telling here. That, like you said, that median that really just kind of gives everything into central perspective. Because what was surprising about me, without giving too much away of my thoughts, was that this was more of a Scorsese film than I expected. I thought it was going to be a little bit more like Silence, where it was a departure for him stylistically, like a little bit more reserved and subdued. And it is. I mean, it definitely makes sense this is coming off of The Irishman, because I think it's kind of doing a similar type of thing where it's more about the consequence and morality of the story, in the sense that, like, obviously something like Goodfellas shows us the rise and the fall, and you can say the same about like Wolf of Wall Street, but you kind of see more of the lingering tragedy of a story like this. And that's so central to having Molly be the focus, because she is, like you said, the one who is not entirely a victim, not entirely, unaware of what's happening around her, but also kept so in the dark, but also has this central kind of intelligence and awareness to be smarter than her husband, but then also like caught in this paranoia and terror of what's going on around her. And also the fact she's like this median, where she is part of the old ways and also of an age where she is of the new ways, with the rise of the oil county and the way she's amassed his fortune. But yeah, it's a really compelling character. It's really well written in the film and the book. But yeah, Lily Gladstone is what's central to really bringing the heart of the film.
Yeah, it definitely is amazing to me to see an actor like her not just go toe to toe with Leonardo DiCaprio, not just have so many one-on-one, like these are two actors inhabiting the same space, and they kind of are, a lot of actors, like male and female, have struggled, when in the presence of like a DiCaprio performance, which can kind of swallow the room sometimes in a bad way. But she is like not just up for the challenge. I think that you can see like she's just an actor who can not just hold her own against him, but also kind of like spark even more nuance from him and vice versa. It really is like it's tour de force. And then I definitely like to think of like the typical Scorsese movie. When I think of directors who are so great at making movies with unlikable characters, I think of Scorsese and like the Coen brothers. And I actually was a little bit surprised by how much Coen brother, I was getting from this movie in terms of like some of the comedy, but also like the haphazard nature of like bad people doing bad things. There's also something in here too that, for anybody who might look at this and say, well, I've seen this kind of movie before from Scorsese. Like, what does this movie kind of do that's a little bit different? And I'm not going to say it's totally different, but if you've ever watched his movies and you see people like in the mafia in his movies, and you see that kind of like guilt that like builds up over decades, and you kind of see that the characters who do bad things, but like the conflict is that it awards them a certain lifestyle, and they kind of relish it and have fun with it. Think of Joe Pesci, think of Ray Liotta. Think of like Casino for sure is one of those movies, not just Goodfellas. But then in this movie, there's like this just nice, friendly approach, like this sort of callous, like one person will just be like, oh yeah, this person's my best friend. They're going to have to die. And it's just like, it's so sinister. But what's sinister about it is it has that like kind of Southern, bless your heart, polite to your face, but really deep down, like you are not worth anything to this human being. And I think what he's doing with this movie and bringing that out, I think it's going to be like kind of, it's going to rub people the wrong way in a good way. Like, I think it's going to make people kind of like open their eyes a little bit to, the history of America is filled with this, like filled with sort of like former friends, just like, and it murder and tragedy among people who I thought this person supported me. I thought this person cared about me, but there's just this like smile, holding the knife a bit. And so I think this movie kind of captures one of the most important history lessons that can be had from that kind of thing. Yeah. What did you think, Mike?
That's what really got me. The first time you read the book, just how the narrative structure is set up. It's like you are in the investigation yourself. Like the first half of the book is all these things are happening, and it's kind of like a whirlwind. You're caught off guard. You're like, how are all these things happening? And then about halfway through the book, like the other shoe is dropped, and who's behind it all. And it's really shocking because it does seem like it's your best friend doing it. Where the movie kind of starts from the beginning, like you mentioned, it's straight to your face. Like within the first 10 minutes, you know who the bad guys are. But but the way Scorsese does his characterization is like they aren't portrayed as these like overly evil like antagonists. No, it's just like you're watching who you think are these protagonists, and all of a sudden they're just like talking about how they're going to do bad things very casually. Like, yeah. Well, these savages, they're going to have to die anyway, so we might as well make good business out of it. And it just hits you in the face, and it's just to your face, and it's so unexpected. And it just really, that's what the movie hinges on as a viewing experience, as a narrative structure, and it's very good. I think it's very effective.
Now, go ahead. Well, I was going to tee you up anyway.
Okay. I was going to say that, that's what's so intriguing about how Ernest is portrayed here, is that he's just this very, I think I used the word already, but malleable personality. Like, he's not someone who is inherently evil. He's just this sort of wholly neutral, admittedly very dumb, but wholly very neutral. He doesn't have
integrity. He doesn't have like a code, so like it can kind of just change, right?
I mean, he's literally gutless in this film. He's someone who has like no pushback or any desire to like do anything other than make money and be rich or whatever.
Yeah, and Will's referencing kind of like a funny joke in the movie where he literally like has a war injury where he was shot in the gut. And so that's what, it's a, there are like so many like little moments in that where you can see Scorsese is just like, yeah, okay, like that's what I'm doing. And go ahead, you can laugh. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's a ton of dark comedy in here, especially in the second half when like the FBI really comes in and like fingers are being pointed elsewhere. That stuff is generally pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, I think what also makes it intriguing though is that Ernest is not like he genuinely cares for Molly. Like it's not like some sort of like calculated play for him. He really falls in love with this woman. He has this very at times simple and at times complicated relationship with her, where there is genuine care, there's genuine love there, but this overseeing force from Hale, it just kind of looms over him and prevents him from really following through with what his heart would want.
It's a movie about it's a movie about the literal and metaphorical poisoning of relationships. You know, it uses that as a technique to sell that idea, to sell that like that danger, right?
But it's also like, did he actually love Molly? I think the movie leaves it like really open-ended and into the interpretation of like, what is love? Did it start as love? At what point does it not become love, or was it ever love in the first place? I'm completely ripping this from the Letterboxd interview that Scorsese does, but there's a big influence in both him and Leonardo's portrayal of Ernest. I'm going to blank on the movie's name, but a movie from the 40s that is essentially about the same thing of a man, you know, being in love with a woman who has a lot of money. And the whole time in the movie, it's open-ended. Like, does he want the money or does he actually love her? And I think they let the audience try to interpret that. And I think it's, you know, one of those things are at certain times, I think they portrayed it as love. And at certain times they portrayed it as taken advantage of. And, you know, is that just how life is?
Well, I think it's a matter of he loves three things. He loves Molly, he loves his uncle, and he loves money. And it's just like this conflicting factor of like, who or what does he love more? And like, because he's just someone who's very kind of like impressionable and very easy to kind of follow, like not like a thought through process, but rather just how can I make the person in front of me happy or like whatever. It just kind of becomes, it's kind of fascinating, but sad and really funny like journey for this guy. And yeah, I mean, it just kind of makes for a really very Scorsese, but also very innately tragic story. But I was just looking up. I know these were the films that Scorsese, I think in that interview, said he was inspired by. You can tell me which one you're referring to, Mike. It was The Harris, The Last of the Line, The Lady of the Dugout, Blood of the Moon, Red River, and Wild River.
It's The Harris.
Years, okay.
But if I also jump to it, I don't know if I'm getting off track of what you want to talk about, John, but psychologically... I
want to talk about you, Mike. I want to talk about you all the time.
Well, here's what I want to talk about. Psychologically, I think Leonardo DiCaprio is the best person to have played Ernest, like from the audience perspective, because I feel like he's, you know, one of our last movie stars. People love Leonardo DiCaprio, especially if you're under the age of 25 and a woman. No, that's a joke. But it kind of makes the audience a little bit more culpable into Ernest's acts because, you know, you start with Leonardo DiCaprio. You're so used to him being, you know, your main guy. You know, he's the sweet little Leo from forever ago.
Just seeing him be confident, competent, and charming. He's none of those things in this.
Exactly. And it's all these things you expect from him. And then you just see him be weak the whole movie. But like, you're kind of along for the ride and you're seeing it through his perspective. And I just think that was a really smart thing for Martin Scorsese to do. I don't know if it was his call or whose call it was to make the switch from him being Tom White to being Ernest. But it's another thing that just makes the movie work so well because of the audience's relationship with who Leonardo DiCaprio is. And then also the treatment of, like, I think Americans being passive in their responsibility for all the tragedies and horrors that have happened to the indigenous people throughout the course of this nation.
Yeah, and this general sense of white people feeling entitled to what the Native Americans have. And that's really detailed vividly and infuriatingly throughout the book. But like just this kind of sense of like, this is innately theirs. This is like what they own. And then even when they're kind of cast asunder, they fall upon this great fortune. Like it's kind of like almost incidental. And then like Americans just continue to try to like infiltrate themselves into that and try to take from them, like you said, like use very arbitrary kind of laws to like prevent them from spending too much money or being too wealthy. And yeah, just in the book, I feel it's more it's angering and just more infuriating. And I feel like in a movie, it's more heartbreaking. You're just kind of watching the desolation and not in real time, but like in closer approximation to what it'd be like historically. And yeah, it's just it's fascinating both ways. But like I said, I think that's what makes such an intriguing parallel. If you watch the film or read the book or vice versa, yeah, definitely agree.
The laws were infuriating. Just like for context, again, this is happening 100 years ago. Like this is 2 generations away. You know, like and first off, we already covered the Osage people couldn't have access to their own money. It had because they were too savage to be trusted with it. So an arbitrary white person with power would be assigned to assign them money. They had to go ask for it. But what's even crazier is that they like if the U.S. government wanted to, they wouldn't even let them have all the oil money. The only reason that happened is that when the Osage were displaced, and the book covers this, they were one of the few tribes to enter into contractual agreement with the U.S. government that the new land that they had in Oklahoma that nobody else wanted, was theirs. And they were entitled to it. They were one of the first tribes, one of the few tribes at the time to be doing that after so many people were displaced. And then it was 10 years later they find the oil. So that's why and the government tried to fight them on it and take them away. So first off, they didn't want to have it in the first place. But then I think a really important piece of context too is that the police didn't exist, especially as we know it. Essentially, in those small towns, there wasn't enough infrastructure to have laws and the police. That's why, King Bill Hale is the deputy sheriff. Because what would happen when a crime would take place, especially a murder, the local townspeople would get together and they would just vote people to investigate the crime. Literally, they get in a circle and they go, okay, who wants to do, you want to do the autopsy? Okay, people would volunteer for it. So it made it even easier to take advantage of the system and commit these crimes against these people to steal their money. So there's so much, and that's the part of the book that really gets me. And it's crazy that this is a true story. This happened, right? Because did any of you know about it before the movie or the book? Because I didn't. I never learned about this.
Only in general terms, but yeah, not to the degree that's covered in the book and not covered in the film.
Yeah, I think the for me was kind of hard. I actually kind of like how they incorporate scenes where it's just showing the Osage people kind of just talking about this with each other, and you have some of the white, neighbors, whatever, in the room, but they're the ones running the show on it. And that's something that I felt was really necessary to just get their venting off the situation. I also really want to point at a couple of the other performers here, because if there was something I wanted more from the movie, it was some of the other Osage characters who do kind of come in and out, but particularly Tantu Cardinal, Cara Jade Myers, they play Molly's mother and sister, and they each have time on screen, to be sure. There's also a character who comes in, I forget the actor's name, but he comes in and he's kind of this he's one of the best friends of King, and he starts up this friendship with somebody who's basically plotting to hurt him. This character who also kind of comes in and out of the movie. And I just thought those perspectives are so interesting and so tragic, and so just watching them having to reckon with the death happening around them and this sort of dread that it's going to happen to them. That's where I was man, this is where the movie is working at its most for me. But it also felt a little fleeting, and I think that was kind of the point of that unrealized potential of those characters is kind of what I'm supposed to be feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I do think I'm in agreement that sadly, I think one of my bigger complaints that I do end up wanting to see more of the Osage perspective in both the book and the film.
There's some of the best parts of the movie, when they're just sitting around talking to each other, Molly and her sisters. I'm this is so great, but then we keep shifting away to other characters that I like, but I like even though they're unlikable.
Yeah, but to the earlier point, Mike, I do want to say, for one, I do really love the cold open of the film, which I think really details what you're talking about in a very cinematic, but also just really impactful and contrite kind of way, or concise sort of way. But also I just like that Scorsese and I'll also credit obviously Eric Roth as a co-screenwriter, is really good about detailing information like into the dialogue and into scenes without it feeling too exposition heavy, and making the conversations feel at least natural to the moment. Like it doesn't feel like we're just like getting facts. Like the closest we get to that is when like Leonardo DiCaprio's character Ernest is like reading from this like book, like a kid's book or something. Like that's the closest we get to like an expository scene in a more traditional sort of way. But even that's like still compelling. There's something kind of haunting and mystic about it. But yeah, as far as the what you're saying, John, the supporting cast, there are just so many, broadly speaking, just so many great faces in this movie. Like, there's just so many people I just love looking at your face, because you're not like a traditional movie. It's like so many great character actors have just so many wonderful faces in this film. But one actor and one face I really want to highlight is Ty Mitchell, who plays John Ramsey, who is probably, if not my favorite, certainly one of my top three favorite characters in the movie. Because I think he's like so tragic, but also just so funny in this movie, just kind of being this like low level guy who's just kind of like forced into doing a lot of the like henchman stuff, and then just kind of just thrown, back and forth, just kind of like treated like nothing. Yeah. And his expressions, his delivery, his just general posture is just so wonderful. And every time he came on screen, I thought, it was sad, but also a hoot.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
If we're talking about supporting performances, should we touch on one of the biggest pieces of controversy to come out of this film?
The inclusion of Will Ashton's car in the background of several scenes.
It is old enough to qualify.
Brendan Fraser. Did we like him?
I was going to bring him up because I have a few. I scoured Letterboxd for some of the more interesting reviews across the rating spectrum, and I have to bring up one common denominator among quite a few of the ones that were, if not negative, kind of middling with it. They all mentioned Brendan Fraser, not in a bad way, but in a sort of like not enough Brendan Fraser, but he really sells his like one or two scenes. There's
2 months.
Literally, like Mike's audio like fell apart while he was trying to mimic the Brendan Fraser performance. I love, like, that was another thing where it's like when Brendan Fraser came on, I was like, this man, he's back. He's so back.
Says the guy who didn't like The Whale.
Yeah, because that was a movie that let him down, let me down, let everybody down, I think. But that's okay, because it gave him the profile he needs to do better things.
I think his comeback started before that, in that straight to HBO.
No Sudden Move. Yeah, we talked about that on the show. Yeah, I think if you liked that movie, you're probably going to like The Killer, the new David Fincher.
Oh, yeah. I will say, I was really, really happy that he was in the film. Performance-wise, I like it overall. I was a little mixed on it when I saw the film. I love his court scene. I don't want to give away the details, but just the whole way that scene was shot, and then just his kind of like what Mike was making there. It's fantastic.
It's almost my favorite part of the entire movie. I think up to that point in the movie, I was getting a little sleepy. I'm not going to lie to you. He woke me up. I was like, oh, Brendan. Hey, there you are.
I think his later scene, I didn't quite buy it, but I also get that like there are like 3 layers to the character. It's like Brendan Fraser playing a guy who's playing a guy, like a lawyer. It's like a Saul Goodman sort of thing.
That's why I liked it. Yeah. The showman version, but then when he's like a little bit more of like, what is the matter with you? I was just like, oh, I know who this guy is.
Yeah.
And he's honestly, it's really good to be opposite John Lithgow as like the more reserved and, for the state kind of guy.
I just can't believe he couldn't, he had to go up against Farquaad. That's a tough competition in the court. I have a bunch of reviews, and more than usual, and they cover some stuff that we haven't gone over and that I want to get y'all's read on as we kind of wind this thing down. So I have a couple of like negative reviews, and I gotta say, it was hard to find negative reviews. It was hard to find middling reviews, because what I kept finding was like reviews that would be like, 3 stars, 2.5. Then you read it and be like, this is a masterpiece. I'm like, what is happening? I don't understand this. It'd be like, wow, Marty still got it. 2.5. I'm like, what the?
Well, John, you got to realize Martin Scorsese is now on Letterboxd. So all these people, especially all these Zoomers, they don't want to disrespect their elders. They just want to be like, oh, he can look at it now.
Well, there are a few people who didn't respect their elders.
Yeah.
So I'll read. I have a couple here. I'll start with the 1 star, the 1.5 star, and it was one of the. I think it was the only 1 or 1.5 star review I could find that wasn't just like a weird joke, but it was actually like trying to say something negative. But that said, it's only like 2 sentences. But here we go. This is from Tristan Moylan. 1.5 stars. The cinematography was good and directed beautifully, but it was so long and dragged out. I felt bored and tired the entire time. This movie was not for me. We talked about the length a bit. I got to be honest, guys. This is a 3.5 hour movie, 206 minutes. To me, it felt like 2.5. I didn't really feel it was over 3. I did feel it was long.
Right.
I'm not gonna lie, but I don't know. I didn't feel like Avengers Endgame long with this.
Yeah, I mean, this is once again film of Shoemaker. I mean, I don't know how much more I need to say about how great she is, especially Martin Scorsese, but immaculate edit this film is. It's extremely well edited in terms of pacing, in terms of scene composition, balance. Yeah, it just, I would, as many Oscars as I'm sure she has, I'd be very happy if she wins another for editing this film. She did a fantastic job.
I think the reason it is done so well and doesn't feel like, you bring up, not to bring up Scorsese versus Marvel, controversy as well, but, those movies that seem like forever long, it's because they have these predictable 3 acts, rise, fall, heroes are going to fail, they're going to come together, they're going to win. And like this movie doesn't, it's just beginning to end this like unpredictable, like non-traditional, great narrative arc of a movie that does.
It's more like reading a book, right? Where like a book, you can read a few pages and like years pass, and that's kind of the sensation you get with this. I think you're totally right, Mike, and I think you too will. And I think part of like why that works and why the editing works the way it does is because the movie doesn't overwhelm you with sensory details. Like it doesn't have like huge, massive set pieces that like activate something in your brain over and over again and wear you out. It doesn't, like, the soundtrack is really understated. Like it's so careful and meticulous about guiding you along, and kind of, like a good DJ, like keeps the thing pumping, but knows when to take breaks, knows when to let you settle in, knows when to like shift gears a little bit, so you don't feel like this is feeling dragged out to me. Now that might not be the case for everybody, because not everybody can feel that same thing, but I do think that this is a really great case, and being able to realize that for the most people possible with this kind of subject material. And that's why I'm pretty impressed.
Yeah, I mean, definitely worth highlighting the final score from the late Robbie Robertson. Wonderfully understated, understated score here. And I do want to correct and say these are massive sets. Like, don't like undersell them, but like they're not like flashy as you're saying. Yeah, they're not like, oh, look at this. It's more like you're getting integrated into this world. And something I found incredible is like when I'm reading the book, there are several pictures throughout, and I look at them. It's like, oh shoot, like that looks exactly like the pivotal house. I don't want to give away what happens, but there's a pivotal house in this movie. Looks to the T exactly in real life as it does in the film. Like they did an incredible job with that.
And there's something to how like the sets, and like I was talking more about the set pieces, so like the action and sort of like the like some of the heavy conversations and things like that. But also, I'm glad you bring up the sets, because I actually think there's something almost kind of dull and gaudy about a lot of it. And like there's such a contrast between when you actually go to see like an Osage wedding, and when you see their culture, and it's vibrant, it's vivid, it's full of life, but you kind of see the sort of soul sucking, like Fairfax kind of like, we got to bring in, all of the, we have to bring in all the sort of like manufactured, like American dream stuff, because this is really what success is. And then it's like, it's such an easy contrast to make, but it's still pretty subtle about it. And I like that Scorsese, like, so his cinematographer here is Rodrigo Prieto. And I really like that he doesn't spend like 10 minutes, just like showing us a big vista, and being like, we're in Oklahoma, baby. And you're about to spend 5 minutes gawking at clouds. We don't have to do that. Like that's not this movie. That's not why this movie is here. There's no sort of like flexing or trying to win cinematography awards for those reasons. It's just kind of jaw-dropping for more interesting reasons, I think. And Prieto has done movies for Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu, and we've seen him be able to do this sort of thing in that kind of movie, but we've seen him do things like Brokeback Mountain. So it's like, I kind of like that this movie finds such a better balance for that kind of approach to the
He's having a big year because he also shot Barbie.
Yeah, and Barbie probably is going to win Best Production Design if it hasn't already.
I just want to call out one, I think, impressive technical shot in the Burkhart house when, or I guess actually it would be in the Molly's house before it's the Burkhart's house, but when they're spanning the bottom of the house when there's a fight happening between Ernest's brother and Molly's sister. The Oneer. And it's you know, it's one of those things where I like how you put it, you know, it's not for flashy sake. It feels like there's a reason they break out that technical style than comparing to all the other choices of shot. It felt intentional and it really worked and it was done very well.
Because the point is there's no pause to this. It's happening all the time. And it's just sort of like a constant, like you're moving through the house like you're moving through the years. And it's not the most original trick or anything like that, but it's just effective, plain effective.
It's kind of like the Copacabana shot, if I'm going to reference other Scorsese.
Sure. Yeah, and it's pulling off. It's the same technique, but it pulls off a completely different emotional, you know, resonance, which is just that's what you want from a director who knows what they're good at and like wants to deliver something they know that their fans will like, but you know, it's going to also help them engage with something a little different.
I was going to say, since we've been talking so much about Scorsese's filmography, I do want to say, and I won't spoil them, but there are several callbacks to other Scorsese films in terms of shot composition. Like there's one in the scene when Ernest is driving the truck that's a direct callback to Taxi Driver. There's a court scene that has the same exact shot composition as the scene in Goodfellas. Like it's very like if you're a Scorsese fan and you've kept up with his filmography as someone like Mike has, there's a lot of fun little like Easter eggs there. Yeah,
the last one is De Niro looking at him, you know, what do I look like, the king of comedy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was a little bit more blunt, but exactly. Yeah.
We're joking in case you have not seen the movie. Okay, so this is from Kylo. Kylo gave it 2.5 stars. After the Oscar shine wore off, I'm not sure what that means, I realized I don't like this movie. The acting was great as expected. Leonardo DiCaprio especially, so was the cinematography. I think Martin Scorsese is out here trying to compete with Ridley Scott to make the longest, most boring movies in their old age, though. So maybe people were sighing in the cinema as this never seemed to end. I felt the exact same way. It was nice to see Brendan Fraser pop up, though even if it was only for a short time. Yeah, you know, I just think that we can't argue with that. If that's your reaction, if you're sitting there and the movie is just not something you're engaging with, and yeah, it's gonna feel super long. And it's a shame. I you know, I don't know this person. I don't know sort of like their background and if they've had similar experiences with other movies. I guess it sounds like Dune is probably what they're referencing. Yeah, we can at least agree. The Brendan Fraser stuff was nice.
I really don't genuinely. Sorry, Mike. I was just gonna say I really genuinely don't get why people are complaining about the length of this one compared to like we just got Avatar: The Way of Water, which is also like nearly 3.5 hours. We don't know
if this person complained about that too, right?
I don't know.
Oppenheimer long.
Yeah, Oppenheimer, and we just have this Taylor Swift movie that came out. It's like 3 hours long. Like we're in the time of 3-hour movies are doing really well. Like why is this one garnering the complaints?
And what I was going to bring up is I think a lot of people, I don't know, they just don't have the attention spans. It's okay. I'm not going to comment on any of that or, you know, I'm not making fun of all these iPad kids. But the thing I see a lot of people doing when they don't like the time is they refer to Scorsese as being self-indulgent. And my question for those people are, what is he indulging? Like what, do people, I think that's a term that gets thrown a lot. And people don't actually understand what the term means. Like,
sure,
this is
pretentious.
The furthest thing from self-indulgent. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there are movies I dislike that I wouldn't say are self-indulgent just because I don't like them. Like Vox Lux. I don't like that movie, but I wouldn't say, you know, Brady, what's his name, was being self-indulgent.
Brady Corbett.
Yeah, there you go.
Love that movie.
Yeah, yeah. And honestly, there are times when I want a director to be self-indulgent because they're probably good at that. I don't know.
Again, like, I mean, it also goes back to another 3-hour film this year, Beau's Afraid. I want filmmakers to be, at least in some respects, self-indulgent. It's a filmmaker's medium. Like, no one complains when, like, I don't know, like, someone writes a 1,000-page book like Stephen King. Like, you're not like, oh, that's indulgent.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's like...
Exactly.
Well, it's the age-old thing. It's like, it's a criticism if it doesn't work. It's praise if it does.
It's Scorsese. I would watch a 9-hour movie. If you want to watch a long Scorsese project, watch My Voyage to Italy. It's almost 5 hours long. And it's just the dude talking about how much he loves cinema.
I was going to say how much he loves Italy. I was like,
well, Italian cinema. Like, this isn't Max Landis. Like, it's like okay to watch a long movie. He's artistic. And I'm sorry, Chris, that I forget this is the family podcast.
No, we're not on Mad Men, man. But if you want the cursing, you can definitely check that out. It's on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts.
Anyway, all four more 3-hour movies, and especially all four 3-hour movies that turn into court dramas, as is the case of Oppenheimer and now Killers of the Flower Moon.
And Detroit? Where? Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. Well, Detroit wasn't 3 hours, I don't think.
No, it's like 2. Okay, so but it was like did turn into a courtroom thing. Okay. I have a couple of 3-star reviews. So these ones are going to be a little bit more like, all right, let's talk about it. This is Harley Quinabi. Give it 3 stars. You know how sometimes your friend is seeing a new guy and he's awful, but you try to be nice. You say stuff like, he has nice hair. Yeah, Killers of the Flower Moon has nice cinematography, and the actors all do a great job. I do like that opening. It's more Terrence Malick than Martin Scorsese. I felt like a hostage during this, possibly the most lifeless film from Marty yet, despite Lily Gladstone doing the most she can. DiCaprio is getting praise for this one, and I'm baffled. Yes, it's impressive he plays such a mumbling simpleton well, but he has only one standout scene that's completely unearned because we never actually see him care about, and I won't give that away. And saying De Niro is the best since the 90s here, to be fair, how many times in the last 20 years did he try to give a great performance? He was much better and had more to do in Silver Linings Playbook, and yes, even The Intern. I actually almost kind of agree with that, but that's because I just love The Intern. The script doesn't explore the characters nor the issues portrayed on screen. The execution is merely fine, forgettable, and too long. This shouldn't come anywhere near Oscars. Killian, I hope you have your speech ready. I disagree with almost all of this. And again, though, if there is a performance where I'm like, I like De Niro in this movie, I don't think he's the best thing about this movie. And I don't think he's trying to be. I kind of appreciate that about him. Like, he has a few good scenes, but he wasn't the character that really stuck with me the most. But I never felt wanting in that respect, if that makes sense. But yeah, everything else here, I don't know. Calling this movie more Terrence Malick, I would say like you have not watched Terrence Malick, because that is just that is just objectively wrong.
Yeah, what is this? Is this like a John Negroni review or something? Knocking Terrence Malick?
I don't see any Terrence Malick in this. At least not in a way that you could say more Terrence Malick than Martin Scorsese. Like that to me is just that's nonsense.
In the sense that it takes place in fields at some point. That's like the only thing that's like Malick-esque.
There's like a couple moments where it's a little dreamy, I guess, but like not like that's, I don't know. That's just a fundamental misunderstanding of Malick, I think. I'm
definitely more favorable on De Niro, it sounds like, than you. I think
I'm not his recent.
Yeah. I mean, just the sense of like, I thought he was really, really good in this. I mean, I think I prefer The Irishman's performance only because that's just his showcase for him.
Yeah.
I think it's such a transformative performance from him, but yeah, I mean, I still think, when he works with Scorsese, he's still doing great stuff. I mean, it just makes it more infuriating or sad when he does like something like this or The Irishman, and then he goes to do like About My Father or like some movie that it's so forgettable I can't even remember. Like, it's just like he'll just do tremendous, towering work and then just the most forgettable movie you've ever seen.
I am a staunch Robert De Niro fan. I think he has the best acting credits of anyone in modern history. Like, if I was going to pick one person's career, I would choose Robert De Niro, because he was able to do things that, like, even if you want to compare him to like Al Pacino tried to make this jump to being an older comedy guy, and he just became a caricature that people make fun of. De Niro does it, and he does it well.
He does Dirty Grandpa, and people are like,
Dirty Grandpa, sure. Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Exactly.
Meet the Fockers, Little Fockers.
Meet the Parents is actually really great proof of what you're saying, Mike. Like, he made that transition. Like, that movie is very iconic for a lot of people.
I got nipples, Greg.
Exactly. You want to milk me? And he's so good. And the thing about De Niro, and especially in this movie, is that he is so iconic. Everyone does a dumb De Niro impression. Everybody knows who he is. Everyone's seen him in other things. And he shows up on your screen, and you don't go, oh, here we go. We're getting a Robert De Niro. Like, you don't go as Robert. He became King Hale. Like, you believed who he was. And I can't get into a ton of stuff without, spoiling the movie for those who haven't seen it. So I won't. But I will say it is, I think, his best performance in years, because he just portrays this real person so well and so masterfully. I said it at the beginning, I would just rewatch this movie just for his scenes alone. I really loved him.
That's pretty fair. In terms of the criticism against DiCaprio, I feel like we already covered what we like about DiCaprio's performance. So yeah, just a fundamental disagreement. I just think that, like, he does play a mumbling simpleton well, and I think that I don't know. I think this person, maybe the way they see a good performance is a sort of showy, like, emotional. But to me, what I like is the more understated stuff. It's the way he treats his wife, the way that like Mike, what you were referencing earlier, the way like you sometimes it's hard to tell like what is his true motivation, but also the way Willie said, like the way he's easily manipulated, and the way his lust for greed just makes him like a worm, but also a worm that you kind of want to follow along to see what happens next with him. And I think that's what's so compelling, at least to me, with his character.
If you think this movie is lifeless, I would challenge your own ability to interpret understated and tonal emphasis in movies.
I don't know. I don't think that that's. I think that if you find the movie lifeless, I just think it just doesn't work for you, and you like certain things about movies that are different from, I guess, us and other people. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I think the only thing there that I was just a little bit like, that's objectively not true, is the Terrence Malick thing. But I don't know. Like sometimes movies, it just there's no accounting, for like if a movie just hits you that way. But who knows? I felt that way about movies that people have been like, what are you talking about, John? Like, you just don't get it. And, there's nothing I can do about that. And the other way around. I have another 3-star here. So this is from Fuji456. Brendan Fraser is about to win back-to-back Oscars for this performance. I applaud Martin Scorsese for putting his heart and soul into this project and raising the awareness that it required, since this movie is so vital to our world. 3-hour movies are gradually becoming the standard in our world. While it's true that certain films need 3 hours to fully portray their stories, others don't. Killers of the Flower Moon seem to last forever at the theater, in my opinion. Due to the length, I can never see myself viewing this movie again. Let me just add that this movie had amazing performances. Lily Gladstone will undoubtedly receive an Oscar nomination, and Leo and De Niro are an excellent acting team. I can see why this movie will appeal to such a large audience. The final moment was so beautifully done. I think the ending was fantastic. I love the ending of this movie, particularly like both parts of the ending. There's like we won't give it away, but like right before the ending, and then the ending itself was just incredible. Like one of my favorite movie endings of the year, easily. And yeah, I gotta say, this is an interesting one in the sense of like, did this movie need to be 3 hours? I think we would probably agree that like we would have been fine with it being longer. But I don't want to speak for you guys.
Yep, definitely okay with the length of it. Absolutely love the ending, and even though I couldn't stop thinking about Mad Men for a little bit with Lucky Strike.
That's right. Yeah.
But
that's the real reason we invited you on, Mike.
The ending, I think, is like there's like so many layers to it. The right before and the end of it, like with the power of the FBI and propaganda, and it's great. It's great. Love
the way we tell stories. We did mention the way the movie invokes the Tulsa massacre, but you can kind of liken the way the ending sort of like, as a commentary on the way that we remember history. And I think that's why this movie kind of pays close attention in Tulsa, since that was happening around the same time. But you were going to say, Will?
I was going to say, I mean, in addition to what you're saying, I also just love that it's like this kind of acknowledgement of the limitations of the film. Like, even though it is this big, grand epic, it can only be so much and, so authentic. And also just kind of a pretty damning commentary on just the state of true crime as a genre right now.
How so? You mean? I see what you're saying. Never mind. We can't be super specific.
Yeah.
Sorry. And then we'll end it out here with a couple of positive reviews. Super positive. So this is a 4.5 from Ryan. kind of blown away. Lots to take in. Loved all the little details that made it feel so immersed in the period. De Niro's performance is the most evil thing I've ever seen. Just horrible. He's so great. Lily Gladstone is an actual revelation. She's outstanding. DiCaprio is a horrible little worm. So many great character actors that pop up. Brendan Fraser going at 10,000 miles per hour is hilarious. Brutally honest about the horrors of colonialism, the insidious nature of racism, and how many people are complicit in it every day beyond the obvious evil ones. Absolutely needs a rewatch just to take it all in. Do you guys plan to rewatch? I think Mike, you already said that you want to rewatch it. I very much want to rewatch it, but in a theater though, that's the question. Or do you want to kind of wait until you can sit with it at home?
Well, I want to finish reading the book and then revisit.
You know what? That's a pretty good idea. I wonder if I should do that, the same thing, because I would like to kind of experience it that way as well. Yeah.
Go movie, book, movie, because you'll watch it in a completely different way the second time. I guarantee you.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really good idea. But yeah, since you already read the book, Mike, you can just go back out and watch it whenever you want. Okay, and then last review here, and then we'll finish out the Rotten Tomatoes game. Okay, this is a 4.5 from the O Husby. This is up there with Taxi Driver as the most poignant of Scorsese's films that I've seen. I really enjoyed it in the I'm glad I saw this movie sense. There's a critique that this movie is told almost entirely from the perspective of white men. And while this is definitely true, the perspective was still interesting because of the frankness with which it depicts these men and their motivations. Ernest is conspicuously stupid to the extent that you wonder if something is going on with him. The same is true for most of his associates. They succeed as long as they do only because their whole community is complicit. Their mindset is one that can only really exist when someone doesn't see another person as being human. Even though I already understood in principle that this is how the US and Canada came to be, it's shocking to see it rendered on film. Yeah, and I labeled, like, the headline for my review of this was a history lesson with The View. And I think that it is a history lesson because it has all of these insightful, important mirrors on our reality. The way racism functions, it's systemic and it runs on a permission structure, a community mindset that allows it to like flourish and incentivizes people to keep it going, even if they personally, individually think that they are not a racist, evil person, until they get to the point where they show that monstrous side of themselves in a way that is just impossible to ignore. And this movie, I think, is a really good diatribe on that. And so I think that's why, like, some people are arguing, like, yeah, it's not fully from the perspective of the Osage, which is a limitation, but it is accomplishing something by doing that in its own way. And of course, people can agree and disagree on whether or not that's a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, I think, ultimately who this movie is for is people who have been complicit in that system and continue to be for different types of racism, not just towards indigenous people. But, I think if it was told from the Osage perspective, obviously it would be a great movie as well. But also I think people would miss the message a little bit easier, right? They would martyr themselves with the Osage people and be like, see, this is what's happening to us too. Or, I think the best way to get that point across was through the eyes of the perpetrators, of people who weren't so overtly evil, but just regular old people doing evil things.
It's an interesting point. I'll really have to chew on that one. Any last thoughts from you, Will? I know you're a big fan of Indigenous people.
Sure, yeah. I don't know where you're leading with that.
Sometimes I just don't know how to tee you up, and so I just choose.
Yeah. I don't know. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't some weird undercurrent with that one. I think we've really kind of covered the gambit. I mean, at the same time, though, I feel like there is so much more we could say. We could really dive into all the wonderful things about the movie.
I feel like we had to make up for, like, Oppenheimer. We didn't go into as much detail for a movie that big, and so I wanted to make sure we did it for this one.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, for the time being, I just hope people see it, especially in the theater. I was lucky enough to see it in Dolby, where it was great, comfy seats, wonderful screen. I hope everyone else gets a chance to check it out in theaters, and I'm really glad that it's getting a much bigger rollout than The Irishman did theatrically.
Same here, yeah. If you are a listener in the Bay Area, definitely check it out at the IMAX while you can in San Francisco, the AMC Metreon. That's a fantastic way to watch this movie. Biggest screen you can find if you happen to find it. But yeah, Dolby IMAX is definitely one of the ways to do it. So I just always want to shout out that IMAX theater because it's one of the better ones, I think, like in the area that I've been to. Yeah. Let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game, though. All right, guys. let's see how Mike does. I don't know if I don't know if we've ever had Mike versus Will. We have 369 reviews counted. One of them's mine, so take that into consideration, I guess. We'll start with you, Mike, since you are the guest of honor. What's your guess? What do you think the critic score is?
94.
Will?
I'm going to say 96.
Mike takes this one. It's 93. So Mike was only one off. Very good, very good. And there is a mirror behind Mike, so I don't see Google showing Rotten Tomatoes. Looks like we're good. Okay, audience score. We have 1,000+ verified ratings. And this one, we'll start with you, Will Ashton. What do you got?
This is tricky. I'm feeling like it's 84.
Okay, and then Mike over.
Mike gut says 87.
Mike overboard. No, that means you didn't get it because you were over. Will was only one off. So this time Will was the one within reach. So far it's 1 for 1. Let's see if Cinema Score can shift the balance.
Yeah,
so
I was going to say, I was spoiled on the Letterboxd one, so I can't contribute to that one.
I haven't seen the Letterboxd one, so I can compete for that one.
Sure.
Cinema Score though, how about that? What do you got for that one, Michael?
Is this one that's a letter? I always forget.
Systems. So the highest is A+, and then the lowest is F.
I'm just gonna say A.
Okay, and then Will Ash.
I'm gonna go A-.
Ooh, Will, that's why you're the king of comedy. It's an A- exactly. And so yeah, you win these rounds. But I haven't looked at the Letterboxd, so I can compete with Mike on that. Now, Will, you should probably check to make sure it hasn't changed.
I was going to say, that's what I'm doing right now.
Okay, nice.
It is
I have been on the Letterboxd, but I didn't look at it because I was looking at reviews. But
no, it is what I was told. So I'll let you guys guess.
Mike, it'll be pretty amazing if you win because I looked at so many reviews. I have a pretty good sense of the movie's star rating, so I have a pretty big advantage here. But it's going to be insane. Like if you beat me, you're gonna if you have the advantage.
You have the advantage. So I think you should go first. I need to hear your guess first.
Yeah, I set the curve.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm waffling a little bit because I know it's got to be in the 4s based on what I saw. My thing is that I barely saw any super low ones, so I'm gonna go a little higher than normal. I think one of the highest we've ever seen was 4.5. I'm gonna say it's 4.4.
All right, and
I'm gonna say 4.3.
That's a good guess because that's more realistic.
One of you are exactly correct. Do you want to guess who it is? It is Mike Overholtz, who is.
Oh yeah.
This time he was underboard. Or no, right
on board. He is on board.
Right on board.
He's on the ship, and he's the champ of this episode.
If you didn't go first, John, I was going to say 4-1.
Dang,
you got me to raise my bid.
I knew when you were saying it too. You were like, "Well, I need an advantage," and I was like, "That's fair enough." Because I knew basically, that I was kind of he could just point at Price is Right it with me right now.
What's more impressive is that Mike is not on Letterboxd, so it's a pure guess.
I'm waiting for that day, Mike. I feel like you are a prototypical Letterboxd user, even though you don't already have one.
The public doesn't need to know my opinions on movies, just my friends.
Well,
and John.
Your friends are on Letterboxd. We're waiting for you. We want to hang out.
He's afraid that he's going to get shunted from the community for his opinion on Mad Max Fury Road.
I'm not going to be worried about that because everybody's wrong about that goddamn movie.
For our next episode, I think we're going to be. Hopefully, we're going to talk about The Killer. I think that would be fun. But it kind of just depends because it's in limited release, so we might have to wait till it's on Netflix.
I thought we were talking Five Nights at Freddy's.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that.
That is on Peacock.
I missed my screening. Oh, okay, all right.
I would gladly talk and discuss The Killer, but it's not playing near me. I don't have a screen.
As soon as it is, we should definitely talk about it.
Sure, I'd gladly talk about that over the Marvels.
Hater. Can I say one more thing before we get off? If you like this movie, if you like the book, and you want to try something else in a similar vein, Truman Capote's In Cold Blood should be stop number 1.
All right.
Sure. Great book, yeah.
Mike is starting an offshoot of Bookaholics. I like it.
I'll gladly take part in Bookaholics if it ever comes to be.
That's going to be it for us this week on Cinemaholics. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week from the Internet California. I'm John Negroni.
From the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Lash.
How do you want to sign off, Mike?
And I'm Mike.
Brett / Brendan Fraser.